So before we begin talking about Web3, the question is, what is Web3? Obviously, if there's a Web3, there is probably a Web1 and a Web2. But before we even talk about Web3, I think first, in order to set the stage, we need to talk about what is the internet even. When I start talking about what is the internet and how do we treat that word? How do we treat that concept? So there are a couple different ways that we obviously treat this. We might treat it as a system of some sort, even if we're non-technical. So, my kids will say, oh, the internet is down or the internet's not working. So implying that there's some sort of a system at work. We will talk about it as a place. So saying something like, well, go look on, that's definitely on the internet. You could find that on the internet. So a place. And then, of course, for in the social media world, and if we're talking about memes or whatnot, we might look at it as a collection or a community of people. So we'll be like, oh, the internet really likes that meme, or, oh, the internet hates this guy. We look at it in all of those ways. Technically, it's a little bit different. Philosophically, what is the internet? It's a bit of a ship of Theseus idea. So for those who don't know the ship of Theseus philosophical concept, the idea is Theseus has a ship, the mythological Theseus. And if we were to replace every single part on that ship, piece by piece, until there were no original parts, will it be the same ship? And if not, when does it become another ship? This is important because the internet, as we experience it now, right? So somebody out there was like, oh, it's a bunch of computers talking to each other. And it's like, okay, perhaps we could say that. But the computers that are talking to each other now are not the same computers that were talking to each other in 1995 when I first got on the internet. So, but it's the same internet. It never stopped being the internet. And so we have a particular relationship with this idea, with this concept that's deep. And it's deep because we're now really and truly living on it more and more. And I think for many of us, this is our first kind of experience with at least a proto version of the metanet, the metaverse, excuse me, metanet. Craig Wright is in my head. This is our first experience with the metaverse, right? And this thing that Facebook changed their name to Meta. They're building their own little metaverse. I think a lot of us have some idea of that this is some diabolical idea, and yet it's a new incarnation of the internet, a new experience of the internet. This is definitely new for me. And yet there's something so much more here than Zoom, right? And yet there's something less in a way and more in a way than attending live. And some of that is just because, I'm looking at these little avatars and everything, but you imagine if the user interface is better, if I'm wearing VR goggles, if I'm walking around, if I have stereoscopic vision and sound and I'm able to move through, do I not perhaps prefer to do it that way than to go in person? And I think for many people, if maybe you're a little shy around people, you might prefer to do it as some version, as some avatar. And certainly it's going to be less expensive. And so this is something that it's not that we're moving toward it. It's here. We're literally experiencing this at this moment. And so Web3 is that next step. And so this is what's important to see, that Web3 is this next step of the internet. We'll talk about how we got there from where we began. As I say, 1995 for me getting on the internet. What is the internet actually? So I know that there are quite a few engineers here, and they all said, it's the protocols. They didn't say it out loud. They whispered it to their neighbor. And certainly at the end of the day, it is. And what are these protocols? They're rules or procedures for transmitting data between electronic devices such as computers. And we call this collection of protocols, you could think of them as languages, procedures. We call this collection TCP/IP. And this includes You know, if you're on your if you're on Gather in the browser, which is amazing in and of itself, that this can go on in a web browser, what's happening right now. You know, and you look up and you click on your URL, you're going to see HTTPS up there. So that's one of them, right? But it's everything from your web browsing to your email to your streaming, to things that you may not have ever used, depending upon your age, like news groups or IRC. All of these are there. These are all languages, and they're all completely open that anybody can use. They're the commons. And so this is what the internet was built on. The most important, of course, is the web. And so let's talk about how we get from the beginning of the internet. Like I say, I began on the first iteration of the web. I use that date of 1995. It's a rather important date, I think, for most people. It's when the first browsers. So we're talking about Netscape Navigator. They weren't very good, but they were certainly the first commercially available browsers appeared. But even before that, we begin in 1989 with the World Wide Web actually being invented at Tim Berners-Lee at CERN. And the first thing that we get is we get websites, or more appropriately, web pages at that time was what was important that people were interacting with. Starting in 1995, when we had, you know, in 1994, we had the founding of some important companies that we still have today. Amazon and Yahoo, they were kind of the first ones to hit. And at that time, very few people were on the internet. Nobody had broadband, certainly. It was all dial-up. It was a very difficult experience, and it was just for the hardcore. And for the next 10 years, we moved along with the web. And most of the world got familiar with the web. And the big thing that happened on the web was we could start to do commerce on the web. We could start to buy and sell things. Everything from eBay to failed startups like pets.com were part of this little piece. And we end off in about 2005, that first 10 years, and we end off in 2005 with the first iterations of social media. MySpace comes about right at that time. It's founded, and people are starting to play around. We've got blogs. People are starting to actually put up content all of their own, and that brings us into really the next 10 years, where the big thing, Web 2.0, we have a whole bunch of new technologies that come around and make the experience quite different from what we had experienced before in the previous 10 years. We start interacting with websites. We start contributing content. We have user-generated content during this time. And obviously, the big thing that we're left with is social media. Some of that is a result of an important result of mobile data and smartphones. Of course, that's what comes just a few years after this shift into 2005, 2007, 2008 is when we have the smartphone revolution, which some of you right now are actually experiencing me talking on your smartphone. So we move around with these things. They become a part of us. They become, in that short period of time, it's incredible to think that within 15 years, for so many humans on the planet, our smartphone is something like almost like an appendage at this point, to where if it's not there or around us, we feel a sense of nervousness, a sense of anxiety. We may go looking for it in our pocket even when it's not there. It's a normal thing that we want to have it around us. It's become that level for billions and billions of people in just a short 15 years of the introduction of the technology, which is something to think about in terms of, well, what will that look like in the next iteration? And so the next iteration, and of course, Web 2.0, social media. Clearly, the big companies, the Facebooks of the world, Google, and obviously one of the most important social media. We don't think of it as social media necessarily, but it certainly began as a social media platform and site as YouTube. That's the U. At the time, in the beginning, you would put a U or a my in front of everything, and that indicated that this was Web 2.0. This was social media. So we have YouTube, and that's perhaps the most consequential of the in terms of moving global culture. That's been the most consequential of the social media platforms. At about 2015, of course, Bitcoin is in 2009. So Bitcoin is well within there. But we don't see the mad rush to start talking about cryptocurrency, to start talking about decentralization, actually until well after that. And I'm putting that right again, I'm just going by these 10 years because it seems to work. That somewhere around 2015, we start getting into the discussion of the next big thing. And the next big thing is Web3. And what I'm going to say Web3 is all about as I look forward into 2025, where are we going to be 3 years from now? What is it that we're going to be talking about? The watchword is digital sovereignty. And I want you to think about that as you, Tobias just spoke about it. It's what underlies, it's the underlying concept of the CBDC. It's the thing that we need to decide upon for ourselves, our communities, our nations. Who is going to be the sovereign of this brave new world? Who is going to be the sovereign of what is now going to become a place that we can begin to live in? A digital space that we will start to live in as we are doing now. So to start thinking of this not as just a system, to start thinking of this not as just protocols, but to start thinking of this as a place that we will be. As I'm giving this talk from my deck in Saipan, and my daughter is inside, my 6-year-old daughter is inside, and she's playing Roblox on her tablet. You don't think that when she's 20 years old, that she's not going to be more than comfortable with the headset on in a virtual world, going to a virtual conference, and maybe more comfortable doing that than she is even in the real world. This is going to be true for many people. And so if that's going to be the case, we need to make a decision about who is going to own this space. Because the way that these protocols are set up, as Tobias has laid out, the way that these protocols are set up, if we don't get this right, it's a panopticon. If we don't get this right, it's a prison that we're going to walk into willingly, and maybe we won't be able to leave because our job is inside the metaverse, because our family is inside the metaverse, because our friends are inside the metaverse, and perhaps we can't leave. And so we have to think about sovereignty. Who will be the sovereign? Will we be self-sovereign? Are we going to decide as a community that it's important to us that we have sovereignty moving forward? These are the questions that we need to ask. Right now, the first step of this, the first step of Web3 and what Web3 is going to revolutionize fundamentally at its core, and what I want to speak a bit about today, and I want you to be thinking about and get to thinking about, is identity. Because in order to have digital sovereignty and where we want to move to in terms of defining digital sovereignty for ourselves, the digital sovereignty that we would like to see, and that is promised by the internet, actually, that I think the development of the internet promised, was the ability for all individuals on the internet to control access to information and to access the information of others, including for compensation. So that is for me to be able to trade information and to charge you for it without the need for a trusted third party. That's going to sound very familiar because that is what Bitcoin was designed to do. Let's take a look at the bottleneck. This is the big bottleneck. So if you're worried, if you see the CBDC and the CBDC worries you, CBDC is often paired with digital identity. I think a lot of people are well aware of this. A lot of people are concerned about this. Certainly over the last 2 years, there was a big push by governments around the world to institute a digital identity for people. That would include things like your medical records, right? What shots have you taken? Let's make sure that you've taken the shots, because if you haven't, your ID is going to be a problem. And we already see this in China. with their recent bank issues. People would go to try to protest. They would get on the subway to think that they were going to go and protest against the banks, and their digital ID would turn red, and it would stop them from going forward. The police would stop them. So we can see what a digital ID can be as a problem. What we're moving to with the digital ID is basically the legacy identity and the identity sovereignty, the authority moved into the digital realm. Now, this is actually a bottleneck, and it's something that if we want to have sovereignty, digital sovereignty for ourselves, this is the place that we can attack, so to speak. This is the know your customer. It leverages state central authority. So if you go KYC and you want to sign up for a crypto exchange, you want to sign up for Coinbase, as Tobias mentioned, they're going to ask you to take a picture of your your government issued ID. That's going to be the most important thing that you do, because they're going to leverage the sovereignty, the authority of the state. Of course, any ID that you have that leverages state authority is going to have limited geographical validity. We're certainly seeing that. We thought we had a relatively open global world, but try traveling as a Russian. Try traveling as someone with a passport that is unfriendly to the particular nation that you would like to travel into, or try even traveling into a country without having an exit stamp on your passport in many cases. So you can't even leave. They can stop you from leaving. And if we want to integrate it digitally, it requires a trusted third party. In all cases, we're seeing corporations. I can't just make my own digital ID, right? The state is going to choose some contractor, and they are going to get the contract to do the digital integration. And of course, identity theft and falsification of identity is incredibly common. I know that there are people in this audience right now, I know for sure, who have had their IDs stolen. So that is a gigantic problem with the legacy identity system. The revolution that is at hand, and is something that most people became familiar with because of Bitcoin, whether or not they know that they are using it, whether or not they know that Bitcoin leverages it as a technology, is cryptographic identity. And as the Bitcoin maxis say, don't trust, verify. So instead of leveraging state authority, public key cryptography leverages mathematics. As Satoshi says in the white paper, it is a system based on cryptographic proof instead of trust. We don't need a trusted third party. It's universally valid. It's valid not just in every nation. It's valid on every planet and every corner of the universe. Math is going to be the same. There are probably some physics PhDs out there who will tell me that's not altogether true. But for our purposes today, I'm going to say that anywhere that you will ever be in your lifetime, this is going to be the case, that these precepts will hold true. It's digitally peer-to-peer, which is very important. No trusted third party. I mean, even now, while it's wonderful that we are able to have this and it's very efficient, all of our data, this whole conversation, everything that's taking place is passing through the servers of Gather. So we have that centralized. And last but not least, so long as you don't show anybody your private key, we may as well think of the theft of that private key as being impossible, functionally impossible, if you don't show it to anybody. Now, of course, there are some attacks. Somebody can still get knowledge from you. We can't prevent that, not yet. But it is a great, great leap forward. Now, it's a completely different way of viewing identity. And this is something that we are going to have to embrace. We are going to have to get used to it. It brings up a whole set of new ideas about ownership, or the inability to own certain things, such as numbers, because that's what your private key is. We've got to begin to think of things differently so that we can build the new world that is going to be significantly different. So these are the things to begin to think about. Everything lies with identity. A lot happened in 2019. I think there was a a big push. We didn't see it or pay attention because there were a lot of things going on in crypto. A lot of people weren't paying attention to this. There are a lot of things taking place in cryptocurrency in 2019. We were beginning a bull market all around in all kinds of markets that people were taking advantage of. But there was an interesting tweet from Jack Dorsey, who at the time was still the CEO of Twitter, who is no longer the CEO of Twitter. And he said, Twitter is funding a small independent team of up to 5 open source architects, engineers, and designers to develop an open and decentralized standard for social media. The goal is for Twitter to ultimately be a client of this standard. What he was talking about, it's great that we're doing this Gather thing, that we could sort of imagine Gather, except what I want you to imagine is, imagine Gather is here, but we are not interacting per se with Gather's servers. I'm walking around and I'm talking to you, and the second that we initiate a conversation with one another, it's actually our two machines begin a peer-to-peer relationship with one another. There's no centralized server. If we were to take this to Twitter or Instagram, you might imagine it like this. When I go to look at the photos on your Instagram account and I go and pull up those photos, I'm actually pulling them off of your phone at a high level. Right? Of course, things will come up. IPFS was mentioned earlier. Other networks to host data will come up, but the basic idea is that it will be a direct connection. Instead of Zoom meetings, where we connect to Zoom and I have an account with Zoom and I'm paying Zoom, it's a direct connection between us. Now, what this looks like and what Jack ended up doing is he left Twitter as CEO. He changed the name of the other company that he was the CEO of, which is Square, the payments company. He changed that to Block to represent the fact that they were going to begin to do more Bitcoin and cryptocurrency related things. And they started a little project. Again, these are like special forces. They're hiring just a few people at a time, called TBD, to begin this process. So TBD is definitely worth checking out. It's very, very early stages, but you can start to get a vision. It's a place for us to start looking at, well, where are people with influence, power, and certainly capital? Where are they focusing their attention so that we can begin to focus our attention in similar places? A TBD, this is a graphic from their site. TBD pushes a vision of something called Web5. It's catchy. Basically, they say this is a transition that they're making from Web 2 into Web 3. It's kind of a Web 2 feeling with Web 3 protocols. So this is the place to start. It'll be happening under the hood, but you'll experience Twitter. And this was kind of the idea of, what if you could experience Twitter as you experience Twitter today, but there would be no more central servers of Twitter? Twitter would still be able to serve you ads, but they wouldn't be hosting your content. Okay, now this is a beautiful efficiency for Twitter because it costs them an incredible amount of money to be hosting all of, you imagine what it takes to host and serve all of the data that is coming in and out of Twitter. It's incredibly expensive. Imagine if they could push that expense off onto you and all of the devices that you have sitting around idle and the internet connection that you pay for. That's the goal. Think about how much more profitable Twitter would be. So it's not all altruistic. But the wonderful thing about what TBD is doing, and by the way, if you want to check it out, the Twitter project is called Blue Sky. So the project that is trying to build a Web3 version of Twitter is called Blue Sky. So you can go ahead and look that up. Again, these are early days. We are at the 1994-95 founding of Amazon, founding of Yahoo, founding of PayPal. We are at that moment now, which is awesome that you're here in the audience and that we're talking about this, because somebody in here could be the Jeff Bezos. Somebody in here could be the Elon Musk or the Peter Thiel of this thing. We are that close. And also there are that few people even knowing that this is happening. This is the vision. Their vision basically has 3 pillars. And again, as you can see, identity is very, very important. So the first pillar is what they call decentralized identifiers. And this is a decentralized ID, which again, this is important. We need to have a way to do decentralized ID. And this is where Bitcoin comes in. In fact, in their vision, this is the only place that Bitcoin plays a role. And what it plays a role as is it plays a role as a source of truth and a timestamp for your cryptographic identity. So you will actually store your identity, which includes how do I route, tells one computer, how do I find you on the network? The same way that you can sort of click here and gather and say, find this person, and it'll show you a route. I don't know if you guys have played around with that. This is the same sort of thing happening on the network. This is their vision. So if I have your identifier, your most recent one that's on the blockchain, I can go to the blockchain at a particular address, find your identifier, and now my machine can find your machine. And Bitcoin is the global source of truth for that, decentralized in that way. A shared ledger. It's a great use for a shared ledger. So they're using Bitcoin for that. The second piece that they envision is verifiable credentials. This is something that this credentialing idea is something that we already use. If you're operating Gather in your browser and you look up to where the URL is, you're going to see a little lock next to that. And if you were to click on that and you were to click through and look at the certificates, those are SSL certificates or X509 certificates, and those are verifiable credentials. So there is a centralized set of certificate authorities that your browser recognizes, like Google, GoDaddy, etc. And GoDaddy says, yes, you are absolutely looking at app.gather.town. That's what you're looking at. We know because we have interacted with them on this particular IP address, and indeed it is them. And they use a cryptographic signature, and Gather uses a cryptographic signature, and it's a chain of digital signatures that allow your browser to know, okay, yes, we have this verifiable authority. So this gives the capability for, let's say, a bank, right? Let's say a bank wanted to use this. Let's say that, I don't know, instead of doing KYC, there's some trusted party that's out there that's going to say, oh, yeah, I've checked all their stuff. But you don't have to share it with, let's say, the exchange. You don't have to share it with whatever platform you're about to use. You don't have to share it with the conference organizers here. It's just right there. It's verified. You've shared it with someone that you trust, and they've just spoken for you and they've vouched for you and said, yes, this is the person. And maybe it's a chain of those as well. So they envision that as part of it. And then, of course, the last piece is this idea of these decentralized web nodes. And this is where all of the data is stored. Now, this can be some server that you've leased in the cloud. This could be someone who's offering this service, and you're paying a monthly fee, and that's where you're putting your music and your photos and your videos every time you upload a video. So imagine this: no more uploading to YouTube and then to Twitter and then to all of these places. It's one shot. You just upload the video, and then any social media platform can pull it associated with your account. Same goes for, so we start to see that it's one set of global data, and the social media network is just the skin, right? So we could bring that on to Gather the same way that we could bring it into an experience on Twitter, the same way that we could bring it into our job in the metaverse. This whole entire set of things that we can then control to the degree that we want. Do I want to have the server that's controlling my things, all of my data? Do I want to have that in my home encrypted? Do I want to make it so that someone can't get into that unless they have some sort of access token? And then perhaps do I want to charge for that access token? And this is where it gets very important on that charging part, because of course, data is valuable. Information is valuable. We're in an information economy. If you control your information, you should be able to sell it, shouldn't you? So instead of you putting your YouTube video up on YouTube and you put it on YouTube because you can't afford to stream it, how about you can afford to stream it because you're charging everybody just a little bit? In order for them to access it, they've got to pay just a little bit. And how are they paying just that little bit? Well, they're going to pay on a digitally native network, and eCash being in my opinion, the only legitimate fork now and useful fork of Bitcoin really represents that. Now, by the way, TBD also believes that it's Bitcoin. They're not doing any of this on Ethereum, although you're going to hear a lot about Web3 on Ethereum. None of this, TBD, the people who are pushing it forward, Jack Dorsey, the capital that's behind it, they believe it's Bitcoin, but unfortunately, it's early days and they're going to figure this out. They think that they can do this with Lightning Network. They are completely wrong. This cannot be done with Lightning Network. So that's what's going to hit them like a ton of bricks. In the meantime, they are making all of these protocols completely open source. So we are able to use them at the speed that they are using them. That's what they've committed to working out in the open. So we should be using them because they've built them for Bitcoin. So they work out of the box on eCash. So it's a wonderful opportunity that we have here. This is their vision. First off, one important thing, apps, downloaded apps, they're going away. They're going away. And we could see that with Gather. You know, I went and I downloaded the desktop Gather app. Stupid me. It works way better in the browser. Way better. And we're going to start seeing this over and over. The capabilities that we have within the browser, this is part of Web3. Is this what we're experiencing right now? If you're checking out and you're in Gather, and for those of you who are checking this out live and maybe haven't signed up for the Gather for this, don't miss this opportunity during the conference. It's one of those things that you just kind of have to experience, and then some of these things will start to just lock into place. So the vision is a PWA is a progressive web app. That's basically an app that is in the browser, but that is indistinguishable from a downloaded app. For those of you who want to experience this, you can experience this with, if you go to cashtab.com on your phone, it'll say, do you want to add this to your home screen? And you could do that. You could also do it with my fork of CashTab, which is wallet.badger.cash. You can add it to your home screen on your iPhone, on your Android. When you click on it on your home screen, it's not even going to open up a browser with the URL and everything. It's going to open it just like an app. And it's going to feel just like an app that you had downloaded. This is the vision. This is where we're going to. Downloadable apps were a bridge technology, much in the same way that podcasts were a bridge technology. So you think about podcasts. I actually have one patent that I'm listed as an inventor on. It's for serving ads into podcasts in iTunes. The whole reason that we had podcasts, this was back in 2007. The entire reason we had podcasts then was because we didn't have high-speed mobile internet. And so if people wanted to listen to things on the go, it was time shifting. The idea of a podcast was for iPods, not even iPhones, but iPods. The idea was that you would just let your iTunes run and let it load up your iPod with your podcasts that were recorded, and then it would just shift them on over, and then you could listen to them. So that was the idea. It's a bridge technology. Obviously, we don't need that now. Who would do that, right? We have our devices that we can listen on the go, and we have high-speed internet on the go, and so we just stream it in. You could think of this as a very similar experience here. What we currently have, if you're looking at web apps, and this is true of CashTab, is that the situation is we've got our web app, and then our web app is going to need some data, and it's going to do one of two things. It's either going to find it locally, or it's going to go out and get it from some remote source. The vision as we move forward into Web3 is that remote source is going to be your infrastructure. Perhaps it's your laptop at your home. Perhaps it's an IPFS node that you've got set up somewhere. Perhaps it is some third party that you trust, that you are storing your data there and they're charging you a little bit every month. Could be any one of these things. Perhaps it's your phone. So the web app is going to first do all of that identification checking using the blockchain. So we're going to have a connection to the blockchain, to Bitcoin, in every single one of these apps, which means every single one of these apps is going to become a wallet. Necessarily, they're going to be wallets. And then it's going to look at it and it's going to find that. Here's an example that they give. I don't even think it's the best example, but it's two of their companies as well, Tidal and Groove. And so the idea here would be you could make a playlist, one single playlist on Groove, and then it could go to Tidal, it could go to Spotify, it could go to any of these. It doesn't matter. You could listen to it. The same would go for uploading music, a podcast, any of those. Now, of course, the important part here is if I want to access your playlist, you can charge me because my app is it's a wallet. So you can charge me to access your data. This is incredibly important. Also important, excuse me one second. Also important here to think about is we have an opportunity to leapfrog because eCash is digitally native. I can actually send an eCash transaction to you in the headers of any request. So I can ask to download something and I can be sending, when I ask to download it, I can actually be sending you payment in that same request where I go to download it. This is totally possible now. It's been possible for years. It's been possible really forever when it comes to Bitcoin. This is not possible if we're going to talk about paying via credit card or whatever. There's many, many steps and many services in between, many financial services in between, custodians in between, all of them who are highly regulated. So we have a grand opportunity here actually to use this technology. Next, this gives us a better idea of what Jack was really up to. I think this is key. This gives us a better idea of this little thing. Oh, we're going to hire 5 open source architects. It's actually a really, really big deal, but it also indicates just how few people it would take for us to make a very big impact. And also, it's not just architects that are needed in this. We need to start thinking about what are the problems that we can solve. We need to start thinking about, and if we're in Gather here, I want you to imagine that in addition to everything that we have here in our little venue, that there was also a showroom, an exhibition hall. And you could go into that exhibition hall, and in the exhibition hall would be someone standing in a booth, but maybe that booth is not there in Prague. Maybe that booth is in Beijing. And they're going to show you a product, and you could buy the product right there from them using a digitally native currency. So using the wallet that you had here. And you wouldn't have to fill it with some kind of Gather bucks. Maybe you could if Gather wanted to do that, but it could just be eCash. You could just bring your eCash wallet, bring your 12-word seed phrase, pop it right in. It would populate it with your funds, and you're good to go. You imagine that? That's technically, in order to do that, even in this Gather app, is trivial. It's actually trivial with the technology that we know that we already have. So this is here. And that's why I say the Bitcoin protocol is it. I've worked on Bitcoin. I've now spent the last 4 months working really heavily on an EVM project. I'm going to tell you, Ethereum and all of its clones just can't cut it. This is not going to be something that happens with Ethereum. It just can't do it. So Bitcoin is it. Bitcoin is what we're going to be using if we are going to have our sovereignty, because certainly the CBDC will be something that is used. Okay. Web3 is it's a digitally native currency. So there will be a portion of Web3 that is the CBDC, and it's going to be one of the ways that they sell it. Is that you're going to need to use this thing to interact in these metaverse environments. The ones that they choose, if we don't build our own, which we can. And it's the perfect economic engine for Web3 for all of the reasons that Tobias laid out. Not only eCash, and first off, not eCash, the native token, but all of the tokens that we can do. There's a lot of experimentation yet to be had of what is going to be the money. Because just as easily with tokens, with SLP tokens, we could do the exact same things here that I'm discussing that we could do with eCash, the native token, because SLP transactions are eCash transactions. So this is what eCash provides. This is what we have to have as a digitally native payment solution in order to have an economic engine that can power a digitally self-sovereign world. That is Web3 as it comes up. The ID certification, well, TBD has already laid this out pretty good. This is the decentralized ID anchoring on the blockchain. We're able to do that. We are absolutely able to do that. Unified payments. So it's a single digitally native payment protocol. That's what we have. We need to have a single network. Those people who talk about, oh, it's going to be one coin, it makes sense. People will choose for it to be one coin. It doesn't have to be, but people will choose one coin over time because you're not going to support multiple coins within your metaverse environment. You're just not going to. You're going to pick one, and that's what you're going to promote. And the one that the most people pick is the one that it's going to be. Most importantly, and this is one of the things that it's very difficult for Ethereum to do, but so easy for Bitcoin to do. Satoshi built it right in. The idea of paying multiple parties in a single non-custodial transaction. So let's go right back to that exhibition hall idea. And let's say that the organizers, they don't actually charge for that exhibition hall metaverse space. What they say is, if you want to sell here, you can go ahead and set up your products. But every time, there's a rule within their environment that every time something is sold, 5% of that sale is going to go in a separate output to the organizers of the conference. And 95% is going to go directly to the sellers that are in that exhibition hall. And that's going to happen peer-to-peer. That is to say, no one takes the other person's. It goes directly peer-to-peer. And the last, of course, is that and I don't need to go into this more because you're going to hear about this throughout the weekend. We have such a robust tech stack. Like it's Bitcoin plus. It's everything that Bitcoin was meant to be is on eCash. And although these capabilities are on other chains, there's something about the people that are involved and the things that they've pursued. It's just been really great decisions that have been made. So I would say here's some projects to watch to start out with. Of course, I've talked about CashTab. So if you haven't used the CashTab wallet, use the CashTab wallet. Or, of course, you can also use my fork. Again, wonderful because this is open source. My fork is at wallet.badger.cash. Theirs is at cashtab.com. You can go and check this out. This is the future. Browser-based is absolutely the way that everything is going. So there aren't that many purely browser-based wallets. This again tells you eCash is on the right path. People are doing this just out of instinct because you have talented people making great decisions. Second, this is a new project. I believe that the founder, Henrik, is there in Prague. So if you get a chance, talk to him. If not, hopefully he will jump into Gather as well, and people could get a chance to talk with him. His new project, this is just going live, and people can start to check this out, is cert.cash. So we were talking about the idea of these certificate authorities. So authorities who can say, yes, I've checked this out. And one of the big problems that we have is we've got this decentralized token ecosystem. Anybody can fire up a token with any name, as people who have been in my Bitcoin Mystery School classes know, because we do that on the third day of class. We build our own tokens. You can build as many as you want with whatever name you want. So we're going to need to have authorities. And again, anyone can be an authority. You could start up your own certificate authority. There are many certificate authorities for SSL certs. But this is the first one that we have that's uses eCash, uses the exact same protocols. It's using the protocols that TBD is using, actually. Right? So we're already starting down this path. And Henrik is there. You should speak with him about it. It's the vision is awesome. Cert.cash. You can also go visit it now. If you have a token yourself, I would suggest that you go and register it. So basically, you will be the only one to have that name and to have the ticker if you register it there, and then wallets can then use that and throw the little cert.cash logo next to tokens. And we can use this across the ecosystem to let people know, yes, this is the legit one. It's going to have several levels of this. So again, talk with Henrik about this and definitely go and check it out. And one of the tokens that is currently registered is the token that I created, and it's the self-minted stablecoin that Tobias discussed. You can check that out at bucks.digital. That's being used here on Saipan in commerce. The system works very, very well. And it's exciting. I'm surprised at how much traffic it gets on this little tiny island. And so we are in talks with several partners now to expand this into some very interesting places, some things that I hadn't even expected, but that are related to the metaverse. So it's actually a wonderful, wonderful complement to that. And you can use it in CashTap. You can, and it uses cert.cash. As I said, it's registered there. Lastly, I want to give a shout out. I know Shama's going to be speaking about this, and it's something that Tobias himself has worked on. Also in 2019, I remember having conversations with Shama about an idea he had. He was way ahead of the game in terms of his ideas on what the future would look like. If you have not checked out stampchat.io, this really the economic model of how could we create systems of communication where we're going to speak to each other, communicate with each other, first in text and then video and all of that. How can we do that? How can we fund it with eCash in the background and do all of the things that I've described? Check it out. These things are there. They are upon us. And hopefully as we move through and we are speaking about these things and you hear, hopefully this has set in your mind a beginning and planted a seed that you can use as you move forward and as you hear the other speakers that I know are going to be wonderful over the course of this weekend. And yes, thank you very much. Obviously, if there are any questions, I would be happy to take them now.